Hey everyone, this is Ben the Bar Guy, hoping you will make better drinks today. Today we're going to talk about what are cocktails. In a previous video, which I'll link in the description, we talked about why you want to do cocktails. Why do you want to make better drinks? What is it about it that motivates you? What deep down makes you want to get a great drink to somebody else or even for yourself? But today we're actually going to get into the how and the what we're doing. And what are cocktails is the subject of this video. So if you've ever wondered exactly what is a cocktail and how do we make good ones, stick with me. Alright everybody, when we talk about cocktails, we're going to first talk about, from an ingredients perspective, what it is. And then we're going to speak philosophically about what a cocktail is. Cocktails are spirit, sugar, bitters, and water. Originally, that was all it was. We'll get into what happened later when we added more ingredients. But originally, the first cocktail, spirit, sugar, bitters, and water. And what was the spirit? Well, spirit generally back then just meant the booze, the liquor, but it also today might mean liqueur. Sugar comes in the form of mini syrups. Here at Reliable Tavern, we use everything from simple syrup, which is 50-50 sugar and water. We have honey syrup, which is 3 parts honey to 1/4 water. We also have ginger syrup, which is fresh squeezed ginger that we add sugar to. And there are many other syrups that other bars use extensively. We stick to those here, but we could also throw in pomegranate syrup, which is grenadine. We could also throw in orgeat, which is essentially an almond syrup. So there are lots of things and ways to sweeten cocktails, but all cocktails have that little touch of sweetness. Bitters come in the form of, back originally, Angostura or Peychaud's bitters. Peychaud's comes from New Orleans and is the oldest bitters, and it's very bright red. This is Peychaud's here. Angostura is probably the most commonly used and popular and old, but not quite as old as Peychaud's, and it's a little darker. Bitters can also come in the form of Amaros. Italian Amaros are being used as bitter components in drinks now, but bitters in a drink are often used to coalesce ingredients. It's sort of the thing that brings everything together. It also was used to settle your stomach traditionally. The bitters I just showed you were. Amaros also are known for kind of settling your stomach, believe it or not. The fourth ingredient is water. We like it to come from large ice cubes. We like to shake with large ice cubes if we can, and the reason is twofold. One, it controls dilution. It gives you more control over how much water you're adding and in what amount over what time. It also allows you to shake really hard and get froth on your drinks, which is important. Froth adds a texture to drinks that are shaken that you can't get with regular ice without also over diluting. So water is really important. In the original cocktail, water would have just been melt from the ice cube rather than shaking. We tend to shake citrus. Things that back then in the old days were opaque or you couldn't see through, you would shake. And things that you could see through, which was mostly booze forward drinks, you would stir. Now while we're at it, we should talk about what does citrus contribute to a drink, because it's not all the same. The citruses we use the most are lemon and lime. Lemon is almost all citric acid, a very specific acid that is bright on the tongue and runs away and is fleeting. But it's bright, it's there, and then it's gone. Lime juice has citric acid as well, but also adds malic acid to the mix. And malic acid is sort of a dull, a little bit bitter, and longing acid that stays on your tongue a little bit longer. And the differences between the two can be massive in some drinks. Other drinks, maybe that difference isn't so important. We also use grapefruit juice and orange juice and pineapple juice as citrus juices in our drinks. The important things to know about that are that likely those juices had more citric acid, either because of the way they were farmed or because of the way they grew or where they grew. back 100 years ago. So when we make those drinks today, we find a better balance on these cocktails with just a little bit of either lemon or lime mixed in ½ ounce or so, just to add that citric acid pop to balance out what today is a largely sweet and not so bright acid in those in orange juice, pineapple, and grapefruit. We call that buttressing. We buttress grapefruit, we buttress pineapple, and we buttress orange juice. Now, admittedly, in old recipes and old recipe books, you will not see that buttressing. And again, we think it's because of the way things were farmed and or where these fruits grew, that they were a little bit more acidic back then than they are now. They're a little sweeter. They might be pumped up with all sorts of, I don't know, steroids, fruit steroids to make them sweeter for our palates today. But in the old days, they were a little more tart. But I wouldn't be upset if you made original cocktails without that buttressing. That's up to you. So now we have our 5 typical ingredients in a cocktail, and now we gotta learn how to balance them, which there'll be future videos about balance that we'll do, but essentially the balance we're gonna try and achieve in every drink is we're gonna take the citrus and the sugar and try and make them balanced. That's called the weak portion. And then we're gonna take the strong portion and make sure that's balanced, either between the bitter components, or we're gonna add water through shaking to tone down alcohol. And we're also gonna try and balance the alcohol with the weak, the strong and the weak. And then water kind of balances everything all together. Now that sounds pretty complicated. It is, it's tough to master this. Balancing a drink is tough. There are ranges we're gonna need to hit, and we'll get into that later. But essentially, taking these 5 ingredients and then balancing them is the trick in making cocktails. So then now we should discuss, what is a cocktail philosophically or historically? What was its purpose? Why did we drink cocktails as Americans, or as in any culture? First and foremost, we should talk about cocktails being necessary. In general, we had to preserve calories that were going to be thrown away or rotted away at some point. So a lot of times grains were brought to your miller in town, and that miller would mill those grains down, but if you had more than you needed for your bread for the year, or you needed to preserve those grains, he often would turn those grains into a liquor for you, or a whiskey, unaged most likely. And that whiskey was probably pretty harsh. The town miller was good at milling. I'm not so sure he was great at distilling, but in any case, you could store that distillate and it wouldn't go bad on you. So it was a preservation of calories. In addition, alcohol killed germs. So high proofs could kill germs and sterilize things, which was very important at a time when we didn't have antibiotics and other medicines that can help us get through being sick. So alcohol was considered a medicine. A second reason for cocktails being so prevalent in the United States was that it was pleasurable. It helped you feel better. It cured hangovers. It even could cure some sicknesses, or at least settle your stomach. And while that might not have been the best medicine looking back, it certainly was a good medicine at the time. In addition, it provided pleasure just and simply it was cold. On a hot day, you could sit on a porch and drink something over crushed or cracked ice, or something that had been shaken for you or was on ice, and it tasted great. It cooled you down. It was pleasurable. Now, specifically about the cocktail, the trick was it was trying to make bad booze taste better. And that's really important. You had all this booze that was preserving calories, and that was great, but you really needed to make that taste palatable, which is an important thing we'll talk a lot about when we're talking about the essence of a cocktail. Making bad booze taste better is the essence of a cocktail. A third aspect about cocktails is accuracy. Being accurate is a philosophical component of cocktails. Measuring accurately, avoiding the temptation to have a heavy jigger. And that also implied consistency. So in cocktails, it's very important that we measure accurately. We know how much alcohol we're giving people. Because honestly, alcohol can be dangerous. And if you don't know exactly what you're giving people, and also exactly what you're putting in the drink in order to balance it and make it taste good, you may not be giving your guests the best product. So avoid that insidious temptation to over-jigger. Now the fourth thing that's essential in cocktails that you should know is that they tend to be best when simple. There's a simpleness to a cocktail. They're not complicated. Few exceptions, no mixed drink having more than 3 main alcoholic ingredients can ever prove out to be anything other than the taste malay that it is. That's important. When you go to a bar, and maybe you've been to one which has their own original cocktail list, and they have someone who's come up with a drink with 6 or 7 ingredients, and it just tastes like, meh. It's not bad, it's not great. That's the taste melee that Charles Baker was talking about. The best cocktails are simple. They're 3, 4, maybe 5 ingredients, maybe a touch of bitters, but they don't go nuts with all sorts of ingredients that fight with each other. And we'll get more into that. How do we tell when something is a problem or not a problem, or an ingredient is too much or too little, and we will figure out ways to get around that and avoid the taste melee. So cocktails are simple. A fifth concept we see in cocktails and philosophically is that they're usually quickly enjoyed. They're enjoyed in a few minutes. They also are meant to be enjoyed probably before dinner or after dinner. Cocktails are really a quick thing. They're fleeting. They're not to be mulled over as much as people sometimes assume these days. Generally, cocktails were a quick enjoyment and then it was over. But as Harry Craddock, the man who wrote the most important cocktail book of all time, the Savoy Cocktail Book, once said, cocktails should be enjoyed quickly while they're still laughing at you. And what he meant was when there was still a froth on top from shaking them. That's really important. Cocktails are generally drunk quickly, and I would say not particularly often with food, although that can happen. Cocktails paired with food tends to be pushed a little too much these days, when generally, historically, and philosophically, a cocktail doesn't fit with food pairings like wine does, or like even beer might pair with food. The last philosophical aspect of cocktails that we should know, number 6, is that it's American. Now, I don't want you to think I'm a flag-waving guy like, I don't know, maybe you've seen this guy before.
Man, this summer's been a drag.
Sounds like you need a pick-me-up, young man!
Macho Man Benny Savage!
Sounds like you need a daiquiri, man! You gotta snap into the lime! You gotta feel the sugary spice! You gotta crack an egg!
There's no egg in a daiquiri!
No one asked you, man! You wanna fight the world champion? Here I come! And don't forget the world heavyweight champion, Frog! Get your daiquiri at Reliable Tavern today!
Yeah, no, it's not like that, okay? The American way of making drinks came from the fact that we had ice for the masses. From poor to rich, we had ice, and it was available in common. And that wasn't the case in Europe or anywhere else in the Western world or anywhere else in Asia. The fact of the matter is, in America, ice was cheap and available. And when you have ice, cocktails can happen, particularly cold cocktails. Now, in Europe, they did come across hot cocktails, which Americans were making too, hot ciders and so forth, hot mulled wines, and other cocktails came from that. But cold cocktails, which is the overwhelming majority of cocktails that we think today, came about because Americans had ice available to them and were shaking drinks commonly from rich to poor, and it was available. So remember, cocktails are uniquely an American thing, and ice in particular is an American thing, but it's not a flag waving situation, it just was what it was. Alright, so that concludes our video on what cocktails are, both ingredients wise and philosophically, and how we're going to approach in the following videos how we go about making drinks and what we try and do and what we use to make the drinks. In future videos, we'll come up, we will bring how you make cocktails into the mix. Right? Now we know what we're making. Let's talk about how we make it, the tools you're gonna need, how we measure, how we shake. We'll get into all that starting in the future videos. So if you liked this video and you want to subscribe and be notified when future videos come out, please hit the notification bell, hit subscribe, and I appreciate it, you guys. And like always, let's cheers to a better drink. To a better drink. Hey guys, before you go, I would be remiss if I didn't mention my employer, where I'm the general manager, Reliable Tavern in Petworth, Washington, D.C., where we do all these videos and trainings for bartenders just like the ones we're doing on these YouTube videos. And you also can get our products on DC to Go, a local company that also is great. It doesn't take too much for us to get delivered items to you, mostly cocktails to go. And so if you guys want to reach out and order, I will put the links to the website and a link to DC to Go, where you guys can get our stuff in the DC area. We've always believed at Reliable Tavern that a great tavern should be commonplace, not hard to find. If you guys have time or if you're in the area, come check us out at Reliable Tavern. Thank you guys for watching the video, and like always, to better drinks. See you guys.